You're listening to The Granite Discourse, a New Hampshire-based podcast with real discussions. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And for early access, subscribe to Patreon for just $1 a month. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Bronwyn.
Yes, hello.
We're live.
All right.
Bronwyn Sims.
Yes, correct.
And welcome to The Granite Discourse.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you asking me to be here.
And thanks for making the trip up here.
Sure.
Now, could you start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Bronwyn Sims, and I am an actress. I'm an athlete and a girls and women's gymnastics coach in Keene at the American School of Gymnastics. I've been an athlete my whole life. Was a gymnast. Started with ballet when I was probably 4 or 5, and then that led into gymnastics. And I had a coach at a local community area in the town that I grew up in, which was Murraysville, PA, right near Export. Tiny little town outside of Pittsburgh. And somebody in that community gymnastics class was like, I think your daughter has some talent. You should pursue further gymnastics. So I did, which I ended up competing until I was about 13. And then, stepped away from it for a little bit of time, but continued my athletic career in different various ways. But I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where my family is. Rural town, small town. And then got kind of a lot of the farms that were around that area, which is why my father bought land there. Got taken over. A lot of people sold out their farms for fracking and other things like that, which was unfortunate. So unfortunately, the area that I grew up in, which looked a lot like rural Vermont, which is another area that I lived in briefly, has been depleted. And now there's all these McMansions and kinds of things like that in the town that I grew up in, which is unfortunate. So a lot of the farmland got pushed out. There's still some, but not nearly as much as not as much as when I grew up.
Mm. And what brought you to New Hampshire?
So I was living in Vermont. I've kind of moved around quite a bit. So when I was 19, I left Pittsburgh because I wanted to pursue theater, and I went into downtown Pittsburgh. So I moved out of my rural area, lived in downtown Pittsburgh, PA, and worked there for a while, continued pursuing theater and dance, decided to go to New York. So I spent a summer there, went to Circle in the Square Theater for their summer program. I was living with a friend who was working on Broadway at the time. And got the New York bug, I guess you could say. So after I was there for a summer and went through the summer program at Circle in the Square, I ended up staying there and stayed in New York City, I don't know, for maybe 2 years. And then my grandmother passed away. Went home for a little while, and then I moved to Boston, Massachusetts. From Boston, I went back to New York City, spent a good, it's hard to remember exactly, but I was in Boston for about 4 years, then went to New York for probably another 6 or 7 years, lived through 9/11, left because I was doing circus work, and moved to Vermont.
Really?
Yep. So the reason why I left New York City.
Join the circus.
To join the circus. You can say. I went to the New England Center for Circus Arts. I met Elsie and Serenity Smith Fortune. That's their last name is Smith, but then when Serenity got married, she had her last name turned to Fortune. So that's sort of what I call them, although I think she's divorced now. But anyway, so I was doing circus work when I went to New York the second time, and started doing trapeze and other things because it related to my gymnastics, and like, wow, this is kind of fun. So I got involved in like this world of circus dance that was going on in New York at the time, somewhere between like 19 99 till 2004 or 5. So I was down there doing that. And in the interim, I met Elsie and Serenity because they came to New York to teach workshops. So they were in Vermont. I went up to Vermont in like March. I don't remember what year it was at this point, but it was still winter there. They had like 5, exaggerating, 5 feet of snow. What felt like 5 feet of snow. I was like, wow, I've never seen this much snow, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. But so I decided to take their teacher training course in trapeze and got involved in Vermont circus. And then New York, at the time, I was going back and forth between Vermont and New York. My boyfriend at the time, we were kind of traveling between the two states and trying to still continue pursuing being in New York City after September 11th and kind of the way the world was. It was a little confused and things felt kind of off kilter in the city. And even though we really wanted to stay and kind of continue to pursue things there, the world of theater and acting, everything was kind of in a strange spot. So I was doing all this kind of circus vaudeville work. And after I met Elsie and Serenity, I decided, well, maybe it would be interesting to go there. They were also kind of trying to get me to move there because I had a gymnastics background. I was coaching gymnastics in New York City. I had worked with all ages from little kinder gym to adults. So I think they felt they were trying to open a school and a program, which is now the New England Center for Circus Arts in Brattleboro. And they were at the first stages of it. So I think they were looking for teachers and people they could rely upon who've taught other ages than what they had done. So we decided to just go and move to Vermont. So we were living outside of Brattleboro. I spent, I don't know, I guess it was a good 10 or 15 years in Vermont, which seems like a long time to me right now. But we moved, a lot of things happened in between that time. I moved several different places in Vermont. By the time we left, I was living in Townsend, and it was 2022. So because of the COVID policies in Vermont and other frustrations, the place we were living, we decided it was time to get out. So we were looking for places in New Hampshire, and actually we were looking for places in Vermont too, but nothing was affordable. Everything was super expensive. Rent prices were super high. People were buying homes like during that time period, just sight unseen. And it was an odd time. We've actually looked at several places in Vermont, and a lot of times we were there and the people who were supposed to show us the place never showed up. So it was just kind of bizarre. So I said to Sean, my boyfriend, should I start looking in New Hampshire? And he said, sure. So I started looking Keene, prices still expensive. And then I saw a listing, it was actually like an Airbnb listing in Nelson, New Hampshire. And I was like, Nelson, where the heck is that? Because I know Keene and I had been through Keene and all around Keene. I was like, I've never heard of Nelson. So we just decided, all right, well, let's check it out. So I contacted the woman, and she had like 2 spaces available. One was like a cabin, and then the other was a barn, like this or actually it was like, I think it's 1700s barn that was partially renovated to put an apartment in. So that was the other space. And when we looked at it and the area that it was in, I was like, this is great because it's very rural. We're a dirt road off of a dirt road off of Route 9 coming from Keene. So it seemed perfect, and we're still there now. So that's what brought me to New Hampshire, was just trying to get out of the sort of situation, partially the living situation we were in Vermont, and then the COVID policies that were kind of coming down in Vermont. Of course, now that I've moved to New Hampshire, I've learned all of the different things that politically in that arena. I wasn't here during COVID. I wasn't in New Hampshire. So I think I thought anything was better than Vermont. But as I've learned now from friends and other folks about what happened here in New Hampshire, there were some good things and there was a lot of bad things still going on. So it's interesting. You think you're moving to a better state and then you get there. And then after you dig in a little while, you start to realize other things that are going on that you wouldn't have realized. Just because I always looked at New Hampshire as the live free or die state. And I was surprised at some of Sununu's policies around COVID that were sort of shocking to me after the fact. But so we're still in Nelson currently, and we're looking for land right now, actually. One of our big things, I think, in the next year is to find property and build a house. My boyfriend is a carpenter. Okay. So he has all kinds of awesome experience. He used to work for Vermont Barns. He's built timber frame houses. He also had his own company when he was outside of Philly, which is where he's from. He was one of the first companies to inspect pipelines. So he has all this kind of interesting experience, but his passion is carpentry and fine woodworking. So I think our goal is to eventually be able to build our own house.
It's good to have those experiences in today's market because it's hard finding people to build you a house.
Oh, yeah. I agree completely. A lot of the trades are the big, at least, I don't know. If I had kids, I would be like, you should learn a trade because they're really, you can learn a lot and you can also earn a lot.
And not be in debt.
Yeah. I think learning to be a plumber, now I'm kind of like, gee, I wish I had learned to be a plumber or an electrician because those guys don't even leave to come to your house without it being like $100 an hour. I'm like, geez, yeah. I should have done that. But I have a master's degree in devised physical theater. So, here I am.
So were you in New York City on 9/11?
Yes, I was.
How far were you from the World Trade Center?
So at the time, the person I was with, a different person than Sean, I worked at the Sutton Gymnastics School, and Sutton Gymnastics was in Cooper Union. So it was like on the 7th floor from, what's it called, the Village Voice? Is that the newspaper? I think it was. Anyway, we lived in Jersey City Heights, but we took the PATH train to Manhattan or New York City every day. That particular day, as everybody says, it was beautiful, not a cloud in the sky. And we would ride our bikes to Hoboken to get on the PATH train. So that particular morning, I believe I left before Patrick, who is my former partner, boyfriend. And I rode my bike to Hoboken, locked it up, got on the PATH train. It was probably, surprisingly, I was early for work. And it was like the first day back after summer break. So there was probably like between summer camps and summer programs, there's maybe like a week. And so that was the first day back. And I was surprisingly like way earlier than I normally am. I don't know, at the time. So I got on the PATH train and I looked at the clock as I was getting on the train in Hoboken, and it was about 8:30, and I would get off at 9th Street and 6th Avenue. Is where, so like the PATH train will stop at different stops, and I would get off at 9th Street and 6th Avenue, and I would walk up 9th Street, and it'll intersect with 5th Avenue and University Place, West Broadway, et cetera, if I'm remembering it correctly. So I got off the PATH train. I was walking up 9th Street, and as I approached 5th Avenue, and you can look down through, I think I'm forgetting the park. So there's like a clear vision of the trade centers because there's a park at the end of Fifth Avenue. I want to say it's Washington Square Park, but I'm not quite sure if it's Washington Square Park. My memory is not as good as it used to be. So as I got up to the avenue, I saw these people standing in the middle of the avenue looking down. And typical like New Yorker brain, even though I didn't live in New York and I wasn't a New Yorker, but I was like, what are all these people doing standing in the middle of the avenue? I'm going to be late. You know, you have this kind of curmudgeon, self-satisfied, like I'm only worried about myself kind of attitude. And as I got closer to Fifth Avenue, the facial expressions of the people staring down the avenue were not, they were blank, they were distorted, they were sad. Shocked. Because invariably on Fifth Avenue, they would film movies.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time you would probably be running into like a movie crew and people were like standing there staring at famous people. But
this was different.
Yeah. And so I got up to the avenue and I looked down to see what everybody else was looking at. And I saw a building on fire. And I was like, and it's far away. So they're like this, and it's far away. And I was like, what building is that? Like I couldn't, in my brain, I couldn't figure out what building it was. I was just like, there's a building on fire. And so I asked a woman who was standing there staring, excuse me, what happened? Like, what's going on? And she never looked at me. She just continued to stare at the buildings. And she said, I don't know. All I can tell you is I saw a plane fly into that building. And I went, what? What are you talking about? Like, I said, well, what? Why was he flying that low? Like, was he drunk or what? Blah? You know, I started to like just kind of come up
rationalize.
Rationalize what she was saying. And she never looked at me and she said, I don't know. All I can tell you is that I saw a plane fly into the North Tower. And then when she said North Tower, I went, oh my God, that's the World Trade Center. And then in my brain, I went, oh my God, Patrick's going to be really late for work. Because Patrick, my boyfriend at the time, would take the World Trade Center PATH train to work every single day. He worked off of Wall Street, not far from the World Trade Centers. And he worked for an organization called the National Council for Research on Women. And he was like the token male who worked there at the front desk. And he had a perfect view out his window, even though he was blocks away, of both trade centers, which it's funny because he showed me a picture later of a photo he took of the trade centers out the window. So I thought, oh, he's going to be late for work. And, you know, I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I had a voicemail, like an automatic voicemail, like a New York numbered voicemail that you could call that you would give
From
agents.
a payphone?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay. So I was standing there kind of just in awe of what was going on. And then weirdly enough, somebody else comes up behind me, a guy named Kevin. I still remember his name. And he said to me, excuse me, what's going on? And I said, well, it was like a game of telephone.
Yeah.
I said, well, this lady right here said to me that a plane flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And he said, what? And then he started to rationalize. I said, I don't know. I'm just telling you what this lady told me. And then right then there was a pause. And for some reason, I decided to ask this complete stranger, this man that I did not know, if he would mind walking me to work.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, of course. I said, are you going this way? And he said, yes. So we stepped off the curb to cross Fifth Avenue. And as we were walking across Fifth Avenue, there was a loud gasp, like, and I was like, what happened? And so then we turned our heads and we looked, and this second plane had hit. But nobody saw it because of that. It was that weird curve into the South Tower. And we were like,
you saw the explosion?
Yeah. So what it looked like, what I kept saying was it looked like there was a fire. I realize now the trade centers are not that close. Like, I mean, they look that close from far away. But it looked like from the North Tower to the South Tower, there was a fireball or bomb or whatever that came off of this building that hit this one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I don't even know how that's possible, but that's what it looked like from our angle. So it was a moment of like sheer kind of panic. And then we just started to walk, and we weren't really talking. We were just walking quickly. And once we got into like the Cooper Union area, there's like Lafayette Street and then Cooper Union and the public theaters right there. He went down Lafayette and I went down Cooper Union. There's like this kind of like V. So as soon as he walked away from me, I ran the next several blocks to work, because in my brain, I think I thought that the people at work may not have seen this, even though I don't know why I thought that. But so I got there, I went up in the elevator, I got out, and we teach like baby gym classes is the first classes that we have in the morning at like 9 a.m., 9:15. And walking around the gym, there was my friend Jim McKay, and then there was a couple other coaches. The owner was there, and the maintenance guy, the owner's name is Bill, and the maintenance guy's name is Valdi. So I was like, did you guys see what happened? Of course, they'd already seen what had happened, because I forgot that we're on the 7th floor and all our windows are huge and they look downtown.
So they saw it.
So they saw everything. And we actually had at that gym, from like the 40th floor up of both trade centers, a very clear view. So we like had a television view, like close-up view of like the trade centers, even though they're technically a lot further away from us, but it just looked closer because you're up in height on what level of floor we were on and then looking downtown. But granted, we only had from like the 40th something floor up. But
at this point, do you guys know that there's an attack, or are you just still trying to figure it out?
I think we're still trying to figure it out, because there were whispers going around the gym. Like Bill, the owner, and Valdi had the television on in the office, so they were watching what was going on. And we're still setting up the gym for gymnastics for little kids. Mm-hmm. And my friend Jim McKay came over to me and just kind of under his breath said, I think it's Osama bin Laden. And I was like, why is he saying that? What are you talking about? Like, I wasn't very politically cued in at that time. I really was not smart about politics. I didn't really pay attention. I didn't know much about what was going on. I mean, I knew what was going on in the world, but it was kind of like over here. I was so focused on my own stuff, my theater, trying to be an actor, trying to make money, just trying to live, whatever. But he made some sort of reference to that, and I went, okay. And I wasn't really sold on thinking anything at the moment. But I was in a bit of a panic because I realized I didn't know how to get a hold of Patrick. Mm-hmm. So as we're setting stuff up, I run into the back where our locker room is and where we put all of the coaches put all of their stuff. And I used the phone to try to call first our voicemail. It just rang and rang and rang. And then I tried to call home. No answer. I'm like, okay, well, now I don't know where Patrick is. I can't get a hold of Patrick. I don't know where he is. I don't know what's going on. So then I made one other phone call, and I called home. And I call, my mother answers the phone. And I probably was like one of the last people to get a phone call out of New York City because I know everything kind of went, there wasn't any communication at a certain point. But my mother answers the phone and she says, Bron, do you know what's going on in New York? I was like, yes, Mom, I'm in New York. I said, I'm in the city. I said, I'm okay, but I have no idea where Patrick is. And she was trying to calm me down and told me to call the house and call here and call my voicemail. And I said, I already did that. She said, well, maybe you should call him at work. And I said, okay, you're right. I haven't done that. So I had a conversation with my mother and my family, so they knew I was okay. And I thought it was interesting that my mom was like, do you know what's happening in New York? I was like, I'm in New York. So I called Patrick's work at the National Council for Research on Women, and I knew some of the people we worked with because I'd been down there before. I had gone out with them to dinner and stuff. And this woman named Liz answered the phone. She's one of the main people there. And I said, Liz. She said, yes. And I said, I said, are you okay? And she sounded kind of
shaken up.
Yeah, just not grounded.
Yep.
And
because they're not far.
Yeah, no, they're not far. And I said, is Patrick there? Has he come to work yet? And she said, no, he's not here. And I said, okay. I said, are you okay? And she goes, well, it's like a ticker tape parade down here. And I was like, okay, well, Liz, maybe you should get out of the building or like, I don't know. Like,
were people around, people in the surrounding areas must have been terrified and probably considering going, evacuating wherever they were, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't down there, but I know now what she means by the ticker tape parade is that it is all the papers. So when the buildings exploded, when the planes hit, all of the like office paperwork and stuff like that were raining down on the ground, and it looked like a ticker tape parade. Like, like when you would have a parade and they would have little pieces
confetti.
Of paper fly everywhere. Yeah, and confetti. So her statement of that made me go, okay, well, maybe it might be a good idea if you think about getting out or contacting somebody or figuring out a way to evacuate your building. So knowing I hadn't been able to get a hold of Patrick, and then she told me that, I was in a bit of a panic, trying to calm down, but also trying to do my job because I'm at work, even though I don't even know what we're doing. And then Bill and Valdi came out of the office really quickly and said that I guess there was news about another plane headed towards DC. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it's hard for me to remember exactly the dynamics or the how things went.
Yeah.
But two little kids showed up for my class. I taught that class. So the classes are generally 45 minutes to an hour with like a baby gym class. So if our class started at 9:30, we were done, around 10:15. So I'm trying to teach this baby gym class. Other kids showed up for the other classes because I think people were trying to be normal. Mm-hmm. I think they were trying to just go through their day like they would normally go through their day, knowing that nothing is actually normal. But if we just try to do something normal, maybe everything will be normal. So I'm teaching my class and still like looking out the window. And then I believe somebody made the announcement that another plane hit the Pentagon. And I think it was at that moment where I was standing in the gym, and I can't quite explain it other than I felt like the ground underneath me was not solid anymore. Like, I think I felt like very vulnerable. Like as if I don't even know if I'm safe right here.
Mhm.
Like I felt as if we were being attacked. Like I think that's how I felt. Like I felt I don't feel safe. So I'm sorry. So when I was teaching, we always get out the parachute to play a game with the kids. And we were all standing in a circle and we're shaking the parachute and we do games and we sing songs. And so it was just like normal, like what we did all the time. We started singing Ring Around the Rosie. And we're skipping around singing Ring Around the Rosie. And as we were singing Ring Around the Rosie, we all fell down. The North Tower fell. And it was just kind of ironic and bizarre all at the same time because I realize now like what that song actually means. It's about the Black Plague and it's about a lot of other things that have a darker history that you don't really talk about with kids. You're just like, sing Ring Around the Rosie. But then when I realized that one of the towers completely collapsed and fell down, I was like, well, that's weird that here I'm singing this song like that. And then the building falls down. So we ended that class. And then at that point, the owners decided that they were going to close the gym for the day. So within that time, within that half hour, Bill closed the gym around 11. We watched the other tower fall from the windows. And I think it was just like an unbelievable shock because you knew there were people in those buildings. You knew there were firefighters in those buildings and policemen. And I can't even explain the feeling of like emptiness and shock and tragedy and just horror, I guess you could say, of being there in New York and having witnessed it physically, not understanding what was going on and the confusion around it all. And then the rest of the day continued with that same amount of like shock, awe, and just horrific kind of tragedy. Because when we left, it was between 11 and 11:30. They said they were shutting down like the airspace and every train, plane, automobile, subway, nothing was moving in New York. They shut down the entire city on purpose. So we were stuck. Oh, I also forgot to say that Patrick showed up at the gymnastics school where I coach. Somewhere between my class ending and the second tower falling. And it just so happened he was late. There's a lot of stories about people being late for work. Well, Patrick was late. He ended up getting to Hoboken, and people were saying that something was happening in New York City. So they had already stopped the World Trade Center PATH train from Hoboken to the World Trade Center, which is what he took to work every single day. And they had stopped running it. And they didn't know why, but they knew that there was an incident. And he said he got on the 6th Street or the 42nd Street PATH train from Hoboken because he knew I was in the city and he didn't want to be stuck in New Jersey or Jersey City without me. So he came in to find me. Which you also have heard, like, there's lots of stories, similar stories to this. But so he came in to find me. And I just have to tell this because there was this rumor that was going around in the early part of 9/11. So he got on the PATH train and people were talking. And somebody says, I heard that there was a plane painted black that flew into the World Trade Center. And just as this guy's saying this, the doors close. And then Patrick and a couple other people said, well, why are we going into the city? And of course, there he did. So he came into the city. He did find me. And then from like between 11 and 11:30, we closed the gym. And then we ended up walking to a friend's house. He lived in Gramercy Park. But during that walk over there, as we left the building, when I left Sutton Gymnastics, we looked down the avenue and there was all these hundreds of thousands of people walking from downtown up. And it's true. Yep. They had soot on them. They had dust. They had crap all over them. There was cars that were driving up from downtown, the ones that could still get from down there with dust and soot. In fact, I even collect, weirdly enough, I have it at home. I collected some dust off of some car or whatever, just because, I don't know, you're doing weird things, you know. There are people in bars, 11 a.m. drinking, like, before a lot of places closed down or shut down for the day. It was weird. I saw two women shopping for shoes. I was like, how are you shopping for shoes when all this is going on? But I ended up not getting back to Jersey City. We didn't get back to Jersey City, Patrick and I, because we went from my one friend's house in Gramercy Park, and then we walked over to another friend's house who lived on 45th and 8th Avenue, because eventually we needed to get to the ferry, because the only way to get home, which we heard on the news, was people who lived in New Jersey had to take a ferry home. So we actually didn't get on the ferry until like 11:30 at night. And there were all these people, and when we got on the ferry, they were... I mean, it was strikingly beautiful and tragic all at the same time, but the skyline downtown, it was this mixture of like red and black and gray and like golds, and it was coming from the trade centers. And it was the skyline was, I mean, it was this bizarre like combination of beauty and sadness all combined. And when I got on the boat, the ferry, there was an older man who was sitting there, and he had his head in his hands, and he was just shaking his head back and forth. And he just kept saying, "Not in my lifetime, not in my lifetime." And I knew what he meant by that, even though I wasn't as old as this person. I understood his pain. And it was a horrifying day. And then the weeks and months after that were just as, I don't know, tragic. But New York was kind of in this interesting place. Like, people were actually looking at each other in the eye. They were comforting each other. They were kind to each other. They weren't in their sort of like selfish, self-moded, it's all about me kind of way. And the missing poster signs were everywhere.
Yeah.
Like everywhere. And the shrines at the fire departments, the shrines in the parks, just very emotional time, I think, in the city. And it was a time when people cared about America. It was like, actually, there was patriotism in the country then that I don't see now. And there was people who loved America, and they wanted to fight for this country, and they wanted to support this country. And it's funny because I went back through a lot of my old photos and stuff recently, because I wrote a Substack about 9/11 and like sort of how how it's different today. And, I found an old New Yorker, which was published, I think, in October of that year. I think it was October, or maybe it was still in September. But the cover is black, and you can only see the trade centers when you tilt the magazine, and they're like a gray. So when you tilt it in the light, you can see them, but then when you don't, the page is just black. But I found that, and then I found like a Time magazine cover, like 2 different versions. One has Osama bin Laden on the front, and then another one like has a picture of a little girl on her father's shoulders, and she's waving an American flag, and she's just, there's like, it says something about patriotism, and it was interesting to look back and kind of think about that in comparison to where we are today, I guess.
I think young kids today don't understand that we're in a whole different country now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they do.
No.
I don't think they do at all. And it's disappointing, I think, especially when you've lived through something. And I'm not saying 9/11 doesn't have its conspiracy theories or its questions, or because I definitely, even though I lived through it, I still question like our government, and I still question like what happened that day, especially after understanding that engineering wise, 2 towers can't really fall down like that. So there are questions that I have around that. Now, I don't believe that we'll maybe ever find out about those answers. Maybe. But there's a lot of questions there, I think. And but it was still a time of that we had gone through something as a country, and then I think people reacted to that in a manner that made sense. Like, we're America first. We're about protecting our country from foreign adversaries, and not that you can't question how it happened, but I think what's interesting is that we still were able to be one. We didn't like fracture off into weird ways, kind of like what's happened now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of lessons I think learned from 9/11 and for myself, and just moving forward now. But
when that happened, well, first of all, I've never had anybody really tell me a personal experience about 9/11, so I want to thank you for sharing it here.
Yeah, of course, sure.
Your move out of New York City, was it because you didn't feel safe in a city anymore after that?
Yes, partially. I think I was frustrated with New York. I went there to pursue being an actor, and I was frustrated, I think, with levels of that, and just like being able to live and feel like I can afford things, which I never felt like I could afford anything in New York. And then when that happened, even though there was this kind of like coming together, and I think there was this like, I'm not going to leave New York. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to fight. I'm going to try to maintain being here. That sort of drifted off after a little while because I didn't feel like things were moving forward in any way. And what was moving forward was the thought of leaving to find a better place where we could make more money, have a better living situation. So yeah, I think not knowing where the acting world was going either, and then sort of also getting into things that were more like vaudeville. I didn't know if the need to have to stay in New York. And I always, even though I went there, I think I always felt like I would rather live outside of the city and still go to the city and try to pursue it. I never felt, I never felt like, oh, I have to be in the city to have a career as a performer, as an actor, even though on some level you did have to do that. But I always found it frustrating. So I think there was a part of me that always really did want to live outside the city, but go into the city and then leave it. You know what I mean?
So since you've moved out of the city and you found yourself in Vermont and then you found yourself in New Hampshire, one of the reasons why I contacted you was Evelyn told me that you've been in contact with the incident in Bow.
Yes.
Is that what your wristband is that you're wearing?
No, actually, one, I just have an I Love USA wristband right here. But the other one is Walk Away.
Okay.
So,
and you run the New Hampshire chapter of Walk Away.
Yes, I do. I'm the New Hampshire state chapter leader for the Walk Away campaign.
So can you tell people about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Walk Away campaign was founded by Brandon Straka, or Brandon Strock. I always want to say Straka, and I think he actually pronounces it Strock. I've met Brandon. He's an awesome person. Brandon has his own Walk Away story, which I'll tell a little bit of. But I got involved with the Walk Away campaign because in 2019, I walked away from the Democratic Party.
So how long were you in the Democrat Party?
Well, okay. So like I said earlier, my political brain probably didn't really click in until after around 2019. I was always kind of like, I know about politics, but I don't really know about politics. I'm a theater person. I'm an artist, a dancer, whatever. And, everybody that I was around at the time sort of spouted back similar things that I was used to hearing. Even though I grew up in a conservative household, my father was a Republican. As far as I know, mostly all the time voted Republican, although that was back when people didn't talk about politics as much. In fact, they didn't even discuss it across the dinner table. You never even knew who my father or my mother voted for because we didn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. The only time politics really got talked about when I was a kid was around Nixon, when I would see him on the TV or something, and then I'd hear somebody say something, but my dad was for small government, Main Street, like small business. He wasn't a staunch conservative, but he was very smart about money. He was a chemist, very smart man. He worked for the federal government. He made flares and explosives and all sorts of things, and had a hard job, which I never even really knew about until I was a lot older. Unfortunately, my father saw one of his coworkers blow up because if you wore the wrong synthetic clothing and it interacted with the chemicals, it could ignite and cause a fire. So, yeah, unfortunately, my dad saw that, and then I think he saw someone lose a limb because of a flare that they had put out in the field. And anyhow, so my mom, my parents were Christian, and they were conservative. My mom has since sort of flipped, which I'll explain. But my dad is gone now, sadly. But I know he was kind of disgusted with the government. I think toward his older years, I think he was just getting frustrated. But he instilled good values on myself and my sisters, I believe. When I look back, I'm like, my dad put the flag up every holiday that, we had a flagpole, and he loved putting the flag up, and it was a beautiful view. And so he would always put the flag up, and I respected that, and I respect that today. But so yeah, I would say that, my background in the Democratic Party, is more liberal, even though I don't even know if I knew what that was called. And then I think when I was living in Vermont, Patrick, who I was with at the time, He was sort of politically savvy, and he grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I think a lot of his background and his family were more Democratic, and he would sort of talk to me about some things, and I would understand some things. And then since we were in Vermont, I got involved with Bernie Sanders, and I was like, oh. And I think it's because at the time, Bernie was speaking for the working class person. 2014, 2015, up to 2016. And so having been in Vermont and being someone who is an artist and always struggling, you're like, oh, hey, there's somebody kind of talking about like the working class person. And I related to what he was saying, even though I didn't like dig deep into why he was talking these things or anything about anything that he was associated with. And Patrick knew a lot about more like foreign policy and wars. He was kind of obsessed with those kinds of things, World War I, World War II. So he had a lot of history, political history, and then, from his family, who I think were more politically involved or politically historian type people, but maybe leaning more Democratic. So I guess I think I thought I knew what I was talking about. And so I was a big Bernie Sanders supporter through the 2016 election. In fact, I wrote his name in. I knew I wasn't voting for Hillary Clinton. I was like, I'm not voting for that woman. She's crazy. She's evil. Like, I know. No. Okay. So I already knew that. I was confused about Trump. I was like, okay, I know Trump's a businessman and he was around in New York, but I don't really know anything about him other than like Trump Tower and like
The Apprentice.
I was kind of like, Donald Trump? Isn't he more like he's not a politician. He's a businessman. He's more of a, somebody like famous who's a celebrity, not a politician, I guess. That was what was in my head. But I didn't really know what his policies were. I didn't really even know what Bernie's policies were, other than he would say a lot of things that sounded like he was for the people, the working class person. So that was where my brain was. And in 2016, I did write his name in. Although I thought it was interesting that there was this like kind of division between people wanting to either vote Bernie or vote for Trump. And a lot of people already knew they weren't voting for Hillary Clinton. Like a lot of people I'd have conversations with, they were like, no, we need something different. We need something different.
Populism.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And I specifically remember trying to get my tires changed. And I went to a place in New Hampshire, like in Chesterfield. And I had a Bernie sticker on my car. And when I went to pay for it, they're like, so what do you think about the election? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And they were like, we have a Bernie sticker on your car. I said, yeah, I do. I said, well, I think I'm, I'm for Bernie. And they're like, okay. And then what was interesting was there was an older guy and a younger guy. And I was talking to both of them. And this is in New Hampshire. And the older guy was like, well, I know for sure it's either Trump or Bernie, but I'm not voting for that Hillary lady. And I started laughing. I said, well, I'm with you on that. And then the younger guy, like 30 years younger, same exact statement. Mm-hmm. And I was like, see, now this is interesting. Okay, this is really interesting. I'm like, okay, Bernie, Trump. Okay. So I was excited that neither of them were interested in Hillary Clinton, even though I had just applied to grad school and I was starting graduate school in Philadelphia, right in the city, in August of 2015. So it was before the election. And a lot of the people at school thought I was crazy because I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. And they were like, Bernie Sanders? What are you talking about? And I'm like, no. He's the person. Now, I have no idea if I don't think they were Trump. I think they were Clinton. Mm-hmm. A lot of the theater students. So they were just looking at me like they thought, what are you talking about? So forward ahead to 2019, I graduated from my MFA program, which actually I look back at now and I go, wow, there's a lot of things I learned from that master's program to today. Mm-hmm. I mean, not just about school, but like I think it was kind of a microcosm of like literally what was going on in the world, but I didn't know that was going to happen until later. So there were things happening within that small microcosm of my MFA class that I look at now that I was like, oh, that's what that was. I just didn't know what that was. Meaning like there were some woke things that were starting to happen that I didn't know what it was. But now I look back at it and I'm like, oh, that's what that was. So in 2019, I had taken Sean, who's my current boyfriend, to a BLM rally in Townsend, down at the Circle there.
So you're still a Democrat at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it took a little while for me to fully understand everything, but when we were walking back to where we were living at the time, Sean turns to me and just, very casually is like, so do you know what Black Lives Matter is or the organization or anything? And I went, no. He goes, well, you might just want to look up who they are. And I was like, okay. So Sean, and I mean, this happened before that, but he would just say little things to me. And Sean is not a political guy. Like, it's just a normal guy. Used to listen to Joe Rogan way back before Joe Rogan was even popular. He was always into MMA. So he listened to some things long before they were ever like hugely popular. And he'd gone down many conspiracy theory routes, like which he has told me later, like before we ever met. Now, granted, he grew up in a family with firemen, policemen, much more like and military.
Blue collar.
Yeah, blue collar. Even though my dad did go to the war, the Korean War, but he was a doctor, or like a med. He wasn't a doctor. He was like a medical tech. And even though I grew up in a Republican household, my mother was an artist. So there was a little bit like it was a little more liberal / conservative at the same time. But I think his background came from maybe a more direct conservative route, even though Sean would never have classified himself as a politically smart person. Like, I don't think he would have thought like I'm like politically that I pay that much attention. But as things were changing, I think he started to pay attention to things.
Do you think that he was paying attention and he thought maybe you weren't?
Yeah, and I think, I'm this like artist girl, and I don't know like if he had ever been with anybody who was like in the theater and hanging because
I think there's something that happens to some people on the left where they'll become somewhat political, but they don't really look into the organizations, just like he was trying to kind of push you towards, give you little nudges. Because I knew people that would proclaim Black Lives Matter, but they knew nothing about the organization at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Sean would go down rabbit holes. Like before he would date, he still does, but I think he just likes to know what he's supporting and likes to have more information to make an actual reasonable decision. Or
it's a good policy to have.
Yeah. And I he blows my mind sometimes because all of a sudden out of nowhere he'll make a statement about something that is like historical, and I'm like, where do you set in your brain? Like, why can't I be more like that? Like he'll say, and I'm like, wow, that's like amazing. You just came out with that. How did you remember that or whatever? So I think he knew more, maybe because he was reading more or, listening to Joe Rogan, who would bring people on that were controversial or whatever. And so he would say little things. And I was like, okay, and maybe because I trusted him and, I thought, all right, well, I should look into this. So
He red pilled you.
he did. I don't even know if he knew he was doing that.
I'm sure he did.
I think one of the things that did happen was I made a statement to him because we got into this argument. We'd only been dating not too long, but I made some stupid girl statement that was like, had to do with like men, but I kind of as if I was saying to him, are you a Trump supporter? Like, because he said something and I went, what? And then I kind of demeaned him and he went, you can't talk to me like that because you have no idea what my story is. And then he sat down with me and told me his whole story. And I realized how wrong I was. And I think it's a good thing to remind ourselves of that every day, that you can't make an assumption about anybody until you've actually walked in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And after I've heard what Sean had been through in his life growing up outside of Philly and telling a story which is opposite to the narrative, kind of floored me. Because Sean hasn't had an easy life. And he has been through a lot. And so I think for me, I went, oh, well, I should just shut up because I just insulted this man and I shouldn't have said what I said. So I learned a lot about his history and how you can't really make any assumptions about people or what they've been through until you've heard really what has happened in their life.
So that was part of what started making you change your mind a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think because I learned that there were other stories than just the typical one of, some of this is like Sean grew up in a very poor neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
that was a black neighborhood outside of Philly, and he was the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean never plays the victim. Sean could play the victim like better. If he wanted to, he could, because the things that have happened to him in his life, he could play that person, but he's not that person because of what he's been through. And if there's anything I could say right now about what disgusts me about the country is this lie about the oppressed, oppressor, victim, victimizer scenario and the hatred of this country, because we want to claim that this country is an oppressor to every other country. And I'm not saying that some of our history in this country isn't shameful, but you're not supposed to just destroy that. You're supposed to learn from it, which I think we have. But now people are pretending they're victims when they're not. And I'm talking about people who have no right to pretend that they're a victim. And that's why Sean's story, when he fully told me his story, it made me reflect on so many things. I think about the whole victim, victimizer, oppressed nature, and then why I left the Democratic Party.
And that was at the pinnacle moment?
Yeah, I believe it was, because after him talking to me and then me starting to have these little bits of information told to me, And then doing my own research, I went, wow, it took me, I think, after 2019 and then through COVID, at least 2 to 3 years of just like, okay, I'm in like having an identity crisis, which is what I felt I was having. Because everything I thought was being challenged, or everything I thought I had thought as a liberal was being challenged. And the lies that were told that I believed, that either the media or friends or social media had told me, that I had looked into and now realized, okay, I've been lied to.
What else is a lie?
Yeah, I've been brainwashed now. And then
you kind of start seeing everything else as a lie.
Yeah.
Like
and then
everything.
Yeah. And then that's when I think it just got so I would spend my days running in the woods, screaming at God. And I'm not kidding you. I have voice memos on my phone asking God to help me understand what is going on. And running was the only thing I felt like helped me release the amount of anger. Even though I'm still an angry person and I hate the fact that I'm an angry person, even though I know that comes from my dad. I got it from my dad because my dad was always angry, even though he's a very emotional man. But that was sort of the pinnacle, I think, to walking away from the Democratic Party. And the biggest nail in the coffin was the transgender movement into women's sports and spaces, because coming from a theater background where I had just graduated with my master's in devised physical theater from Pig Iron and the University of the Arts, I would interact with gay men who would dress up in drag all the time. It was no big deal. They always knew they were a man. They might dress up in drag to perform, but they knew they were a man because at the end of the night, those clothes would come off, the makeup would come off, and they were a guy. Mm-hmm. And I interacted with all kinds of people. I mean, I dressed as a guy and performed. I put on masks and pretended I was male. Sure. Like, okay, you're in the theater. That's what the theater is. And I think when it became this thing of, no, I am a woman, I was like, no.
Now you have to believe that I'm a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it became it's like I was being forced. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that had happened during that time was I was in the co-op in Brattleboro at one point, and there was a guy who was dressed as a woman, but he looked like a guy. Mm-hmm. And I guess I used the pronoun that said he, and I was demeaned and screamed at and humiliated in front of people I didn't know because I used the wrong pronoun. And I left thinking, this is weird. This is not right. I don't understand this. I'm not changing my language just because you think you are this. And it got very frustrating and confusing as a woman to be like, okay, I came from, I'm a theater person. I'm a very open person. I'm a very accepting person. But now you want to say you're a woman when I know you're not a woman. I know you're not a woman. And when did this all of a sudden become a thing? Like, and what I also think is strange is that a lot of the people that I was in school with, we had a girl come into the program halfway through who wanted to be called they, them. And all the other classmates were like, what is this they, them thing? And I was like, I don't know. I said, I'm just going to call her by her name because that confuses me. And everyone else thought the same thing. And this is back in 2017.
And are a lot of the people that you're dealing with, that you're talking about, are they more likely to be liberals?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I know most of my class. They won't talk to me anymore. Like most of the people that I graduated with in my master's program, I haven't spoken with any of them in probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I know they all thought like, what is this they them thing? This is weird. Like, I don't understand it. But now many of them are they thems.
Really?
Or they have lashed out at me on social media telling me I'm a hateful person. Like, I can't believe someone who taught us acrobatics in our master's program is acting like this. How dare you? Who do you think you are? You're awful. You're a hateful person. You're a mean person. And gee, Bronwyn, what happened to you? And I'm like, what happened to me? Nothing happened to me. The world changed, so I have shifted because what is being pushed on me now is not normal. I'm just a normal person. I don't think of myself as right wing, left wing. I'm actually an independent and undeclared voter, and I just consider myself a common sense, normal thinking person. Like I'm just normal. I think about what's normal in the world, not. I mean, and I think that's why I get frustrated a lot because if you associate over here with this, well, that's right wing. If you associate over here, well, that's radical left wing. And I mean, part of our problem right now, I feel like in this country is that we're always dividing people by what they stand for rather than actually looking at the fact that there's a lot of gray area in politics and gray areas in the way people think and act and interact with people. And we always want to just okay, you're over there or you're over there. And I get frustrated with that because sometimes I just want to say, well, I don't know. I'm just trying to think normally here. Like, what happened to just normal? Like,
you have to join a tribe these days. It's
like if I'm not in exactly, if I'm not in some tribe that says this is what I believe, then I'm outcasted.
Mm-hmm.
And the walkaway campaign, I think the reason why it related to me was because they're accepting of all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just about supporting America first, civil liberties, and that they're about protecting the individual. They're not outcasting anybody. And that's why the message of the walkaway campaign struck me, because Brandon, the way he sort of approached things when he found out what was going on back in 2016, a similar thing happened to him. He was on Facebook and he was crying about Trump winning and asking questions. And some woman from the South wrote him a message and said, well, I think you need to look at these things. So he started doing research and going down a rabbit hole. And then he found out he had been lied to. And then he started this whole movement. And the way it started was he did a walkaway video. So he went on to Facebook and he did this video and was just him talking to the camera about why he was leaving the Democratic Party. Because I think he had done enough research that he could come on and give actual facts along with his own emotional testimony. And that struck a lot of people. And then he encouraged people to do videos. So he was getting thousands of videos and he was posting them on his Facebook page. And he started to accrue millions of followers on Facebook. And then I went to his website and I looked down through the website and I got more involved in the walkaway campaign slowly. It took me time because I was afraid to speak out. I was afraid to rock the boat. Because
have you lost any work since you've been involved?
I've lost work. I've lost friends, and I've actually lost family. Sadly, it was during COVID. I lost work. I had an employer trying to force me to get vaccinated, and I'm very much about body autonomy. So, and being an athlete and a person who's always dealt with their body and been health conscious, I was like, no, you're not going to tell me what to do. You're not going to tell me to get vaccinated. And at that point, I think I had done enough research by the time that this person was trying to force me. And I just wrote a very nice letter. And yeah, they fired me. They wouldn't hire me. And then a similar thing happened at another program that I was teaching at. And I think they found out my stance around certain things, or also just refusing to wear the mask all the time. And they let me go. In terms of being fired from walking away, that hasn't happened to me, but I've lost a lot of friends. I've been called every name in the book now, and I don't care anymore. I'm like, you know what? Fine. Actually, being censored and being called names makes you stronger, and I don't look at it as I'm not depressed about it. I mean, the thing that makes me sad, I think, is my family.
Mm-hmm.
A conversation that I had with my mom probably back in 2022. It was right after Biden came. It's right after Biden came out with their blood red background and the military there. And, you know, I made a mistake before the election in 2020. I tried to reach out to friends and alert them, I guess, to what was going on. Like, we're being censored and this is happening and that's happening.
But they're probably where you were 10 years earlier.
Right.
So like, she's gone crazy.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think they were like, what the hell is Bronwyn talking about? How dare you send me a thing about Trump, or whatever. And so I stupidly did it, and I did it in the wrong way, not like what Sean did with me. But I was very open, I think, to that, to him telling me things where I didn't realize how closed people were, and me trying to reach out to my mom or my old friend George or whatever to like help like enlighten them. And it just got smacked in my face. I was like, okay, this is not good.
A lot of us can relate to that. Don't worry. You're not
like,
the only one.
geez, the door smack. But yeah, because I guess I kind of knew what was coming down the pike. And so I voted for Trump in 2020 in Vermont. And of course he lost. But so, I guess my mom kind of knew where I was going with the whole vaccine thing, because I think I said to her, I don't know if I told her outright I wasn't getting vaccinated, because I don't know if I would tell her that outright, because the problem is back when I was a big Bernie supporter, I would go at my mom and be like, no, Mom, Bernie. And she'd kind of be like, what are you talking about? And so, and this is after my dad had passed, or like he wasn't doing well. So like I was pushing like the whole liberal thing on her. And then my older sister kind of was in her face all the time about fracking. So I think between the two of us, like being sort of liberal, we were like at my mom. And so she shifted somewhere. All of a sudden she decided she was an atheist, and all of a sudden she decided like she was a Democrat. And I don't know when that actually happened exactly, but I know that some of it started to come out when the whole vaccine thing and COVID. And even though I don't think I ever directly told them, I think they knew I wasn't interested in being vaccinated. And then as I slowly started to express myself, I don't know how many of my family were following me on social media, but I think they started to get the idea that maybe I wasn't in the same ballpark as my older sister Deborah and my mom. And so Joe Biden makes that speech. And, I had sort of back and forth conversations with my mom, but like it would be like we would talk and then we wouldn't talk. And then we'd talk and then we wouldn't talk. And so Sean was like, maybe you should just drop all the politics with your mother. She's old. Like, leave her alone. Like, just don't go there with her. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. She is old. I should just stop doing that. And have a relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
So, because we've always had a good relationship, but then, I don't know, between my older sister, Deborah, and then politics. So I called up my mom, and I don't remember exactly when he made that was it the State of the Union speech? I can't remember.
I don't think it was.
I don't know why the hell he made that speech, but anyway, it was not long after that speech. And I feel like it was September, but I don't know why I want to say that. But so anyhow, I called my mom on the pretense of, I'm just going to call my mom. And so we started to talk, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden, she started in on something. And I was like, Mom, where is this going? Because she made some comment about, are you a Trump supporter? Like, and it alluded to that. And I went, well, what is it? Why are we talking about this? And I think it was because she had seen Joe Biden make that speech. And then she's never met Sean. She went on Sean and she said, is he telling you she started to blame Sean. Like, is he telling you things about, about Trump? Is he like convincing you this, that? And so then I started to get a little irritated. And I was like, Mom, that's not why I called you. I called you to just have a conversation, not to talk about politics. But now you're trying to blame Sean, somebody you've never met, on the fact that why I have changed my political viewpoint. I said, has nothing to do with Sean. I said, I can think for myself, and I do think for myself. And I said, look, I also teach in schools. I said, you don't have any idea what is going on in the school system right now. And then we started to talk about the transgender issue. And this is where things got a little sideways. So I tried to tell her, Mom, boys can't be girls, right? And they shouldn't be in our sports and this, that, and the other thing. And then she started to get a little wiffle waffly on me. And I was like, Mom, what are you saying? And of course, I found out later the reason why she was acting like that. But so I kind of got angry at that point. And I was like, Mom, no, I don't believe that. I never will believe that. And I said, I don't know who's telling you these things, but that's not true about men trying to be women. And it was weird because all of a sudden, I mean, granted, where I live in Nelson, I don't have great cell service, but the phone
click,
disconnected. And I was like, did she hang up on me? I don't think she hung up on me, but there was this weird, so the phone got disconnected and I was like vibrating. Like, it was weird. Like, I felt like my whole body was like vibrating from the phone conversation. And I had the window right there slightly open and I heard this loud tweeting and I was like, what is that? And I was like, there's a bird. And I was like, it's tweeting so loud. And I looked out the window and right in the tree next to the window where I was standing with it slightly open was a cardinal. And it was looking right at me. And it was talking. And I was like, oh my God, that's a sign. That's my father. I was like, there's my dad trying to tell me it's all fine. It's okay. It's okay. And I really believed that. I still believe it. I still believe that, yeah, that cardinal was my father trying to say, Bronwyn, it's okay. It's okay. Because I was like, that's not my mother. That's not the mother I grew up with. How dare she say that? Turns out, I find out later, my older sister's son, whose name is Kaylin, has transitioned to be a girl. And now they call him Kaylana. So I feel like from that time on, like, my relationship with my older sister and my mom kind of diverted. Unfortunately, now I haven't spoken with my mother or my older sister. I haven't spoken to my older sister since my father died, which was in 2014. And my mom and I really haven't had a phone conversation since, I want to say Mother's Day. I still I try to reach out to my mom, and Deborah's sort of a lost cause at this point, but I still try to reach out to my mom because my mother's in her 90s. So, and I pray about it all the time, but
it seems to be something that a lot of people have gone through, losing their family, but people do come back from it. And I know that the trans issue is very personal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like Evelyn was saying here, a lot of people don't want to lose contact with their children. They don't want to lose contact with their loved ones, so they'll go along with the trans issue to keep things cordial.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are sacrifices people have to make.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like that. It seems like it's kind of a social contagion to me.
Yes, I agree.
And there's an element of conformity to it, where if you don't conform to it, then it's on you for some reason. But hopefully things start subsiding a little bit.
Yeah, I hope so.
We can go back to that time where, like you were talking about, after 9/11, where everybody seemed like we were unified.
Yeah.
I do remember that. I was a teenager when all that happened, and I remember, like I said, kids don't know what the country was like before 9/11.
No, I know. And it's it's sad that they don't have a respect for our flag or Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and just the understanding of what America is really about. And I think that's it's unfortunate. I mean, every country has its good things and its bad history, and I think, you have to accept the history in order to change and move forward. You can't just deny that it didn't happen, or you can't blame the founders or the people who had slaves. I mean,
dwelling on the past won't make a
it won't
better
change
future.
the future. I
No.
mean, you have to look at it and go, okay, we're going to make change, but you can't just pretend it didn't happen and like you said, dwell on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, the history that's being told to children today and college students is not correct, in my opinion. I actually had just recently attended a DEI. I can't believe I even sat through what I sat through of that. A DEI workshop at Keene State College, which literally I went like.
Did you do it on your own free will? Or
Yeah,
did
I mean,
you
there was
have
like
to
5
for-
of us that went. Some other women who I work with that are in the GOP.
Mhm.
We all decided to go just to see, like, what are you telling people? And it was disturbing. It's disturbing to have people up there basically lying about our history. And what was exciting for me, because as a white woman, I wasn't going to raise my hand to this African woman who, I just kept my mouth shut. But one of the women who came with us is a black woman, and she's Republican. And she challenged her on several points, which I was like, good on you. Because people fail to remember that the slaves that came to this country were sent here by black Africans to be slaves to white people. So first you are a slave to a black person who sent you to America to be a slave for white people. And we also forget that almost all cultures had slaves.
Mhm.
Mayans, Incas, Aztecs, and many of them killed them.
There's more slaves today than there were before we eliminated slavery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't even know how many because so many of them are caught up in sex trafficking and human trafficking and other trafficking. And we aren't even child trafficking. We're not even aware of how many slaves there are. And I mean, for that matter, we're a slave to our own phone.
Or banks.
The bank, many other things.
So if for somebody that's in the transition from being a liberal or a Democrat and they're starting to see this change, they're starting to notice some of the things that you've noticed. I know that I noticed them when I was younger that are starting to push you to a more conservative mindset. Where can they find information about the walkaway movement?
Sure. So the Walkaway Campaign has their own website. I believe it's just walkawaycampaign.com. Brandon Strzok, probably yell at me. Sorry, Brandon, if I'm saying your last name wrong. He also has a website. It's under just Brandon Strzok, or his last name is spelled Straka. I think it's .com. So those are the two websites I would check out. He also started his own Walkaway social. So and that's on those websites. So you can check out the Walkaway social, because what happened to Brandon was after he woke up and then started this big movement and had all these followers on Facebook.
Pull the plug on him?
Well, he was at the Capitol on January 6th.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Dear God. So, but he was on the other side of the Capitol, not on the side where everybody was going into the building.
Yeah.
He was on the other side of the Capitol with his phone, and he filmed an 8-minute video.
Yep.
That was it. But because Brandon has a big name and a big face and had millions of followers on social media, not just Facebook, but all the other social media sites, they came after him. So the federal government basically came after Brandon, shut down every way that he could make any income, shut down all of his social media sites, fined him, put him in jail. He got a lawyer. He had to go through several trials and whatnot, and they had him on house arrest. Of course, he was pardoned by Donald Trump after Trump got elected, like many January 6ers, but basically had done nothing. But because Brandon had followers and people who paid attention to him and what he was saying, they didn't want that. So they had to clamp him down as much as possible. Brandon has a story, like many other people have stories. He has a very powerful story, which I've heard. And
well, anybody listening, there's a good reason to start walking away.
Oh, yeah. Now more than ever, you start running.
Yeah, all those people were political prisoners.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're learning that there were 275 federal agents in the crowd.
Yep, of course. I mean,
there's a lot more to tell there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that we'll probably get the truth about that.
And then there's that pipe bomb there.
Right, and which there was some more information that came out about that recently, but I don't know how much of that was verified yet.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, there's so many things out there that are like, you're like, well, why isn't there more info on that? I mean, I know everybody's like all into the Epstein thing, which I'm not saying I'm not. I'm very interested in women, and obviously, and I support women. But I don't know. Sometimes I'm not really sure about the whole Epstein thing. I would like to know certain things, sure. My honest thought is that Donald Trump had nothing to do with any of the sex scandals with Epstein. I feel like.
Did you see? I think it was one of the Democrat social media pages that came out and said that Epstein was a good judge of character because he didn't like Donald Trump.
Isn't that contradicting their narrative?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, also, I heard that, I don't know which rep this was, that tried to get the Epstein files to be presented in Congress like right away, and then the Democrats didn't want to pass it.
It's probably Thomas Massey.
Yeah, it was somebody who wanted to do it like right now, right? Like let's get it going right now, and they were like, no. So I don't know. And they also had 4 years to do it when Biden was president. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
I mean, okay, we all know he interacted with Jeffrey Epstein. We all know that he was at Mar-a-Lago, but we also know that he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. And I think Trump knew that there was weird shenanigans going on, and that's probably why he was trying to distance himself. I just personally don't believe that he had anything to do with that, like anything weird. But of course, I may be completely wrong, and I'll have shit on my face, pardon swearing. If that is true, I would hate to think it is, but I just don't believe it, and I don't. You know, there's a lot of things though that I'm curious about, like the whole Charlie Kirk murder, the 2 attempts on President Trump's life. Like, what happened to all the Thomas Crook thing? I know Tucker Carlson just came out with a big thing about that. But there's all sorts of things that you're kind of like, all right, well, what's up with that? And what's up with that? Which I would love more information on. You know, but things in the government are weird. Sometimes you're like, maybe we shouldn't know all that stuff because maybe there's a reason why we don't know about all of that stuff. I'm not saying that I want transparency. I agree with transparency and honesty and being truthful and being accountable. But sometimes I question, well, maybe the reason why we don't know that is because there's other bigger reasons that could be a security threat or a national threat or I don't know. I mean, I don't know. How do I know what there's not huge leaders that could be accused that could just, I don't know, put a bomb or a nuclear warhead like to the United States if we released information about that. I have no idea, but I just think sometimes we all want to just be like, I want the information. And we don't actually take into account that there may be other reasons why we're not getting that information. And to think rather than to go down the negative path and just assume, oh, well, that means he's implicated or that means this, that actually maybe they're trying to protect the American people from something rather than, just expose it. You could go down many routes about it. I do think it's important if you have the information to release it because it doesn't look good when you're hiding things either.
No. And then the victims of Jeffrey Epstein aren't really getting any justice.
No.
And Ghislaine Maxwell's sitting in jail, but no one knows who she was trafficking to. So what laws did she break? You know?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think
that's my take.
Well, yeah. And there's also like big questions like, how did he get all this money? You know, like how did Jeffrey Epstein have all this money?
It's such a huge rabbit hole to go down.
You know, and I did see that Trump is investigating he wants to do more investigation around Bill Clinton, J.P. Morgan. There's the guy from Harvard, that there's actually going to be more investigation done on specific people that were mentioned in the emails that came out recently related to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to know where all the money that he had, like where it came from. And I know that there are certain things that have to protect victims' rights. So there's certain things you can't expose.
Right. You said you have a Substack that you
Yep.
write?
I have a Substack that I write on regularly. It's under my name, Bronwyn Sims.
Okay.
And I have I'm on X, and I think it's under BBS Freedom. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, X, all those things.
Bronwyn, I want to thank you for coming by and
oh yeah, of course. It's awesome to talk to you and tell some of my story and.
Thank you for sharing everything that you did.
Of course. And, I think that, you just got to get out there and be courageous and speak the truth. And, if there's something that you find that is contradictory to the way you think or feel, there's nothing the matter with speaking your voice and speaking your truth, and just to be courageous to do so, especially, on college campuses and things like that. But I'm also, I should tell you, I'm the state chapter leader for the Independent Women's Network as well, which is an organization that supports women's rights to our spaces, our sports, locker rooms, prisons, things like that. But Independent Women's Network also does a lot of other work in the field. It's not just women's issues, although one thing they state is every issue is a woman's issue, which I think is true.
Well, I want you to come back and tell us more about it.
Yeah, of course. I would love to.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
And thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Craig.